The luxury hotel in the center of the city was busier than usual that morning. Shiny black cars lined the driveway, and photographers gathered outside with cameras ready. Inside, the staff moved quickly but quietly. They polished the marble floors one more time, adjusted the flowers in the lobby, and checked every corner so nothing looked out of place. Today was not an ordinary day. A billionaire, known for his worldwide business empire, was about to sign a deal with a famous Japanese investment group. The deal was said to be worth $500 million. Everyone whispered that it would change the company's future forever. Mari, a hotel maid who had worked in the building for many years, tried to finish her duties without drawing attention. She carried fresh towels and checked each suite, making sure everything looked perfect. But this morning was harder for her than usual. She had no one to watch her daughter, Hana, after school. So, Mari quietly brought Hana along, asking her to wait in a calm corner of the service hall with her books. The girl was obedient and polite. She never disturbed anyone, and most of the staff liked seeing her smile. Hana was no ordinary teenager. Though she was shy, she had spent years studying Japanese through books, online lessons, and even practicing with tourists she sometimes met in the hotel lobby. She loved the language because it felt like solving a puzzle. She could read complex characters, understand business words, and even knew old sayings. But almost no one around her knew this secret. To the staff, she was just Mari's daughter, a quiet girl who liked to read. That afternoon, as Hana sat with her notebook, she noticed a group of men in suits entering one of the conference halls. Cameras flashed and microphones were tested. The billionaire walked in with confidence, shaking hands and smiling. His team looked sharp, carrying thick folders and laptops. The Japanese guests followed behind, bowing politely and speaking in soft voices. A professional translator stood ready to make sure nothing was misunderstood. At first, Hana only listened because she was curious. She had always liked the sound of Japanese, and here was a chance to hear it used in an important setting. She watched the translator carefully. The Japanese advisor spoke slowly, saying, "The funds will be placed in a protected escrow account, and all parties must approve any movement." Hana nodded quietly to herself. She knew the words clearly, but then the translator turned to the English side and said something very different. "The funds will be transferred directly and will not be reversible." Hana's eyebrows rose. That was not the same thing. She sat still, unsure. Maybe she had heard wrong. She leaned closer, pretending to adjust her shoe, but really she was listening more carefully. Another Japanese guest mentioned security and joint approval. But again, the English translation changed the meaning into something more open, something risky. Hana's heart beat faster. She repeated the words softly to herself in Japanese just to check. No, she was not mistaken. The translator was not telling the truth. A few minutes later, a young staff member rushed by with a pile of documents stacked high on a tray. One sheet slipped off the top and landed near Hana's feet. She picked it up carefully, planning to give it back. But as her eyes glanced over the page, she noticed the bold heading, Escrow Protection Clause. She read quickly, and the Japanese text on the page clearly stated that the funds could not be touched without the agreement of both sides. But the English summary below the heading said something else. It spoke of a non-refundable transfer to an outside company. The difference was shocking. Hana's fingers trembled as she held the paper. Could it really be a mistake this big? She thought of her mother, who always warned her to stay out of trouble at the hotel. If Hana spoke up and she was wrong, Mari could lose her job. Yet if Hana stayed quiet, the Japanese group could lose $500 million. It was too large, too serious to ignore. The billionaire, standing at the front of the room, smiled broadly as the cameras clicked. "Trust and friendship are the keys to our future," he declared. The translator echoed his words smoothly into Japanese. The guests clapped politely. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but Hana felt a cold shiver inside. She could see a crack hidden under the shining words. She leaned toward her mother, who had just walked into the hall carrying a tray of water glasses. In a whisper, Hana said, "That's not what it says." Mari looked at her daughter, surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Hana pointed to the paper in her hand and whispered again, "The Japanese words say the money is safe." But he told them something else. "He is changing the meaning." Mari's face went pale. She glanced around nervously, afraid someone might hear. "Hana, we cannot speak in this place," she said in a low voice. "This is too dangerous. But Hana's serious eyes made her pause. She had never seen her daughter look so certain. It was not childish guessing. It was confidence. Hana truly knew what she was talking about. The translator continued, switching back and forth between languages with a smile. The Japanese guests nodded, unaware of the trick being played. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, looking comfortable as if victory was already his. Hana clutched the paper tighter. She felt small in the grand hall, but she also felt that she was the only one who could see the truth. Every sound grew louder in her ears. The clicking of pens, the shuffle of shoes, the scratch of notes on paper. She stared at the red seal at the bottom of the page she held, a symbol of trust now twisted into something dangerous. She knew she had to do something. She could not let this pass in silence, but she was only a maid's daughter, sitting in the corner with no authority. Who would believe her? Mari touched her daughter's hand, signaling her to stay calm. "We will think," she whispered. Not here. Not yet. But inside, Hana's mind raced. The translator's words echoed, non-refundable transfer. Her own voice whispered back in Japanese, protected escrow. Two meanings, two futures. One honest, one dishonest. As the billionaire raised his pen to sign the first page, Hana's heart pounded like a drum. She could almost hear it in her ears. She knew one thing for certain. Silence would protect her mother's job, but truth would protect millions of dollars. In that moment, the weight of a secret sat heavy on her shoulders. She did not yet know how, but she knew she could not stay quiet much longer. Mari guided Hana quickly out of the large conference hall and into a quiet service hallway. The sounds of cameras and speeches faded behind them. Mari placed her cleaning cart nearby and leaned close to her daughter. "Hana, you must explain everything slowly," she said with a worried voice. Hana nodded, holding the paper she had picked up earlier. She opened it carefully, showing her mother the bold heading. Escrow Protection Clause. "Look, Mama," Hana whispered. "This part in Japanese says the money will be kept safe in an account. Both groups must agree before moving it. But the English part says something else. It says the money can be sent to another company with no return." Mari's hands trembled. She had cleaned hundreds of rooms in this hotel, served powerful guests, and stayed invisible for years. Now her daughter was pointing at words that could mean disaster for people far above their world. "If you are wrong, Hana," Mari whispered, "we could be in great trouble. They may think we are making stories. You know how strict this place is." But Hana shook her head firmly. "I am not wrong, Mama. I studied these words. I know them well. The translator is changing the meaning." Mari closed her eyes for a moment, thinking. She loved her daughter dearly and wanted to protect her from harm. But she also knew Hana had a sharp mind. If she said something was wrong, it was likely true. Still, the danger frightened her. Speaking up against a billionaire's team was no small matter. Hana traced her finger across the page again. "See this name, Mama?" she said, pointing to a short company name written in English letters. It looked unusual, almost like a code. Hana remembered it from what the translator had said earlier. Then, as if by chance, she noticed the same name again, this time printed on a catering box that two workers pushed on a trolley down the hall. Her sharp eyes connected the details. Her heart thumped. Why would a catering delivery have the same company name as the one hidden in the contract? That could not be a coincidence. Hana quietly followed the trolley with her eyes until it turned toward a private meeting room. On the frosted glass of the door, there was a paper schedule taped up. Hana gasped softly. The same strange company name was listed there, booked for a side meeting. Mari looked at her daughter, confused and worried. Hana whispered quickly, "Mama, they are using that company name everywhere. It is in the contract. It is on the boxes. It is on the meeting list. Something is wrong." Before Mari could reply, the door opened. The translator stepped out, speaking quietly with the billionaire's legal aid. Hana noticed a thick envelope being passed to the translator, who slipped it quickly into his pocket. He also carried a folder with a red tab sticking out. On his keychain, Hana's sharp eyes caught the sight of a small USB drive shining in the light. And in his other hand, she saw a sticky note with 3 numbers written in bold ink. It looked like a code, perhaps for one of the shell companies she had just noticed. Hana stayed still, hiding behind her mother's cart. She did not want to be seen. Mari placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder to keep her calm. The translator and aide walked away, speaking in low voices, not noticing the 2 quiet figures near the wall. When they were gone, Hana whispered. Mama, we cannot keep this to ourselves. The investors are in danger. They believe their money will be safe, but it will disappear. I cannot watch and do nothing. Mari's heart raced. But who would listen to us, Hana? We are just staff. They will laugh, or worse, they will punish us. Hana thought hard. She needed an ally, someone who had respect in this place and could connect her to the right person. Then she remembered the kind concierge, Mr. Ellis, who had always been gentle with her mother. He was older, polite, and trusted by guests from around the world. He might know what to do. Let us ask Mr. Ellis, Hana said firmly. He will know the right person to talk to. Mari hesitated but finally nodded. They found Mr. Ellis near the lobby, helping a guest with directions. When he finished, Hana stepped forward politely. Sir, she said softly, may I ask you something very important? Mr. Ellis smiled kindly. Of course, young lady. What is troubling you? Hana explained in simple words, careful not to speak too loudly. She told him she could understand Japanese and that the translator was not being truthful. She did not accuse anyone directly. Instead, she said she was worried the guests might not get the right meaning of the agreement. Mr. Ellis studied her face, then looked at Mari, who gave a small nod. He realized this was serious. Lowering his voice, he said, There is one person who might help. Her name is Ms. Aiko Takahashi. She is a compliance advisor traveling with the Japanese team. She is known for honesty and clear judgment. If anyone should hear this, it is her. Mari's eyes widened with fear. Is it safe? She asked quietly. Mr. Ellis nodded. Ms. Takahashi is fair. She will not dismiss the truth if it is clear, but you must be respectful and careful. Hana's heart lifted slightly. She bowed her head politely and said, Please, can you introduce us to her? Mr. Ellis agreed. He guided them through a side corridor to a smaller lounge, where Ms. Takahashi was reviewing papers. She was a calm woman in her early 50s, dressed simply but with dignity. She looked up as the concierge approached. Ms. Takahashi, Mr. Ellis said gently, This is Mari, one of our staff, and her daughter Hana. They wish to speak to you for just a few minutes. I believe it may be important. Ms. Takahashi raised her eyebrows slightly but nodded. All right, she said in a clear voice. Please sit down. Mari felt her knees shake, but Hana sat up straight, clutching the paper. For the first time, she would have a chance to share what she knew. She promised herself she would speak carefully, with respect, and only with truth. The weight of $500 million and the safety of honest people rested on her young shoulders. And as the meeting began, Hana realized this was the moment that could decide everything. In the small lounge, the air felt calm but serious. Ms. Aiko Takahashi placed her papers neatly on the table and looked at Mari and Hana with kind but curious eyes. Mari sat nervously on the edge of her chair, while Hana held the document tightly in her hands. For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of distant footsteps in the hotel hallway was the only thing filling the silence. Finally, Ms. Takahashi spoke in a gentle tone. Mr. Ellis said you had something important to share. Please tell me. Mari hesitated, but Hana leaned forward. With steady breath, she began. Ma'am, I can read and understand Japanese. I listened to the translator in the conference hall. What he said in English was not the same as the Japanese words. The difference is big. It changes the meaning of the deal. Ms. Takahashi's eyes sharpened. She studied Hana's young face carefully, as if weighing her honesty. You understand Japanese? She asked slowly. Yes, ma'am, Hana replied politely. I studied for years. Please let me show you. She opened the page she had picked up earlier and pointed to the bold heading. This part says funds are placed in protected escrow. Both groups must agree for movement. But the translator told everyone, funds are transferred directly and cannot be returned. That is not correct. Mari's hands twisted nervously in her lap. She feared her daughter might sound too bold. But Ms. Takahashi leaned closer, reading the text carefully. She asked Hana, Can you read 2 more lines for me directly from this page? Hana nodded. Slowly, she read aloud the Japanese text, then translated it into English word by word. Her voice was calm, clear, and respectful. She made sure not to exaggerate or add anything extra. Ms. Takahashi listened intently, then asked her a second test. What about this phrase? She said, pointing to another paragraph. Hana translated again, this time explaining a difficult business term. She paused to explain the difference between 2 similar words. one meaning temporary safeguard, and the other meaning permanent transfer. Ms. Takahashi's face grew serious. She sat back in her chair, silent for a few seconds. "You are correct," she finally said. "The wording you heard in Japanese protects the investors. The English summary removes that protection. This is not a small mistake. It is a dangerous change." Mari's eyes widened. She felt both fear and relief. Fear because her daughter had just proven something very serious. Relief because Hana had not been mistaken. "But how can we prove it?" Mari asked quietly. "We are only staff. No one will believe us if we say it alone." Ms. Takahashi tapped her pen on the table thoughtfully. "We must be careful. We cannot accuse without proof. If we move wrongly, the signing will continue and no one will listen." She looked at Hana. "We need a test. Something simple but clear. I will ask the translator to explain a line during the rehearsal session. If he changes the meaning again, it will be proof that something is wrong." Hana's eyes shone with determination. "I can help. I noticed he skipped a rare word earlier. It is not common. If you ask about that, you will know if he truly understands." Ms. Takahashi nodded slowly. "Good. And I will ask him to translate a simple proverb one every Japanese child knows. If he cannot do it correctly, then it will show he is pretending." Mari bit her lip. She did not want her daughter to stand in danger, but she saw Hana's resolve. Her daughter was not acting out of pride, but out of a strong sense of truth. Mari reached over and squeezed Hana's hand gently. The three of them prepared quietly. Ms. Takahashi reviewed the contract again, marking the sections she would question. Hana whispered the Japanese words softly, making sure Ms. Takahashi could recognize them during the test. Then, after a deep breath, they returned to the rehearsal hall. The rehearsal was smaller than the main event. Only a few staff members, the legal aides, and the translator were present. The Billionaire's team looked relaxed, smiling as they prepared for the grand signing later that day. The translator stood at the front, adjusting his tie, ready to work again. Ms. Takahashi raised her hand politely. "Before the rehearsal continues, may I ask for a brief clarification?" The translator smiled smoothly. "Of course," he said. She pointed to a section of the contract. "Please read this part in Japanese, then explain in English what it means." Line by line. The translator hesitated for a brief moment, then began. He read a few words in Japanese, but quickly shifted into an English explanation that did not match the true meaning. He replaced escrow protection with direct transfer once again. Hana's heart pounded. She could hear the lie. Ms. Takahashi's expression remained calm, but she wrote a note in her book. Then she asked gently, "Thank you. One more question. Could you translate this proverb for me?" She spoke in Japanese. "Saru mo ki kara ochiru." The translator blinked. His smile faltered. Then he gave an awkward English phrase. "The tree is strong and the monkey climbs forever." Hana nearly gasped. That was completely wrong. The proverb actually meant, "Even monkeys fall from trees," a saying about how even experts can make mistakes. It was a proverb any fluent Japanese speaker would know. Ms. Takahashi closed her notebook softly. "I see," she said in a steady voice. The translator looked uneasy. He cleared his throat and tried to change the subject. But the seed of doubt was planted. The aides exchanged nervous glances. Mari, standing near the back with Hana, felt her stomach twist. She knew they were on a dangerous path, but she also knew the truth was beginning to surface. As the rehearsal ended, Ms. Takahashi thanked the group politely and walked out with calm steps. Hana and Mari followed her to the lounge once more. "This is enough to pause the process," Ms. Takahashi said quietly. "At the main signing, I will request a line-by-line reading in both languages. If the translator gives another false version, I will call for a second opinion. At that moment, you may need to step forward, Hana, but only if it becomes necessary." Mari gasped. "Step forward?" "She is just a child," but Hana interrupted softly. "Mama, if that is what it takes, I will do it. I cannot let this happen." Her voice was steady and her eyes glowed with quiet courage. Mari stared at her daughter in silence. For years she had seen Hana as her little girl with books and dreams, but now she saw something more, a young woman with a brave heart. Ms. Takahashi bowed slightly to Hana. "You have a gift, and today it may save many people from great loss. But remember, truth must always be spoken with respect. Do not accuse. Only show what the words truly say." Hana nodded. Yes, ma'am. I will only speak the truth. The plan was set. The next event would not just be a signing. It would be a test of honesty, courage, and quiet strength. And as Hannah walked out of the lounge with her mother, she knew she was carrying a responsibility much larger than herself. But she was ready. The grand ballroom of the hotel had been transformed into a stage of elegance. Glittering chandeliers shone brightly overhead, casting warm golden light across long tables covered in fine white cloth. Rows of chairs were neatly arranged, and the front row was filled with guests of honor, journalists, and high-ranking executives. Television cameras stood ready, their red lights blinking as they prepared to broadcast the event across the world. The billionaire entered the hall with a confident stride, his suit tailored perfectly, his smile broad and polished. Reporters shouted questions, but he only waved with charm, shaking hands as if he were already victorious. His aides followed closely, carrying heavy folders and digital tablets. Behind them, the translator stood tall, his face calm and professional, though Hana noticed a flicker of nervousness when his eyes briefly met Ms. Takahashi's. Hana and Mari stood at the back of the hall, near the service staff. Mari held a tray of glasses, pretending to be busy, but her eyes constantly glanced toward her daughter. Hana's small frame blended into the background, but inside her heart pounded. She remembered every word Ms. Takahashi had told her. Do not accuse. Only show what is written. Respect is stronger than anger. The billionaire began his speech. His voice carried power and confidence. Today, he declared, we build a bridge of trust and friendship. This partnership will open doors to a brighter future for both sides. The translator stepped forward smoothly, turning his words into Japanese. But Hana's sharp ears caught the small changes, the subtle twists in meaning. They were not as obvious as before, but still they leaned in favor of the billionaire's team. Hana clenched her fist quietly. She knew it would get worse when they reached the contract clauses. After the speech, Ms. Takahashi rose politely from her seat. She bowed slightly and spoke in Japanese, her voice calm but firm. Before we proceed with the final signing, may I respectfully request a direct reading of the escrow clause, first in Japanese, then in English, line by line. The room grew still. Reporters tilted their microphones closer, sensing tension. The translator forced a smile and nodded. Of course, he said. He opened the folder with the red tab, his fingers moving quickly across the pages. He began to read the clause in Japanese, but Hana noticed he skipped key words, muttering them softly under his breath. Then he spoke the English version loudly. Funds will be transferred directly and are final. A murmur spread among the Japanese delegates. They looked at one another with slight confusion. Some tilted their heads as if something felt off. Ms. Takahashi's pen moved across her notebook slowly. Then she turned to the group. For perfect clarity, I would like the Japanese text to be read aloud as written without summary. Is there anyone here who can assist with this? Silence filled the hall. The translator adjusted his tie nervously. The billionaire frowned slightly, but his smile remained fixed for the cameras. Mari's hands tightened around the tray she carried. She looked at her daughter with fear, shaking her head slightly as if begging her not to step forward. But Hana remembered the faces of the polite Japanese guests, trusting the words spoken to them. She remembered the sticky note, the catering boxes, the hidden company name. She thought of the enormous number, $500 million. Her small hand rose slowly. I can, Hana said softly, her voice shaking at first but growing steady. The room turned. Journalists craned their necks. Guests blinked in surprise. Even the billionaire looked startled. Mari gasped, whispering, Hana, no! But it was too late. The moment had come. Hana bowed politely toward Ms. Takahashi and the delegates. Please forgive me. I am only a maid's daughter, but I can read Japanese. I will show only what is written. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. He whispered something quickly to his aide. The translator's face turned pale, but he could not stop the process now, not in front of cameras and dozens of witnesses. Ms. Takahashi nodded with respect. Please, child, read what you see. Hana stepped forward, holding the page with both hands. Her voice was clear, though her heart beat loudly in her chest. She read the Japanese text slowly, word by word, pronouncing each phrase carefully. The hall was silent, every ear listening. Then she translated into English. The funds shall remain in a protected escrow account. They cannot be moved unless both parties agree in writing. Gasps spread across the room. The difference was unmistakable. Delegates whispered among themselves, their faces tense. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Hannah lifted her eyes, her tone respectful but firm. That is what it says. The billionaire's aide shifted uncomfortably, pulling at his collar. The translator tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Ms. Takahashi raised her hand calmly. "Thank you," she said to Hannah. That was clear. She then turned to the translator. "Why is your version different?" The translator stammered. "Perhaps a mistake. A misunderstanding." His voice trailed off, but Ms. Takahashi was not finished. She gestured toward the folder with the red tab. "May I see the original file and the index, please?" The aide hesitated. The billionaire gave him a sharp look, and slowly, unwillingly, the aide opened the folder. Inside were two versions of the contract, one in Japanese, one in English. The difference between the two was glaring. The Japanese copy had protection clauses, but the English version redirected funds to the outside company. The Japanese delegates exchanged stern glances. One of them leaned toward Ms. Takahashi and whispered something urgent. She nodded, then spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "We request an immediate pause. The terms do not match. This requires further review." The room erupted in noise. Journalists shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in on the billionaire's face, which had turned stiff and tense. The translator looked down, avoiding every eye. Security staff shifted positions near the doors, ready in case of trouble. Mari clutched her daughter's shoulders tightly, proud but trembling. She whispered, "You did it." "Hannah, you showed them the truth." Hannah's cheeks flushed, but she stood steady, knowing she had fulfilled her duty. The billionaire forced a strained smile for the cameras. "There seems to be some confusion," he said smoothly. "A small miscommunication. Nothing serious, but no one in the room believed him anymore. The atmosphere had changed. Trust had cracked like glass, and the sound of that crack echoed louder than any words. The microphones were switched off, and hotel staff hurried to guide reporters toward the exit. The signing ceremony was halted. Behind closed doors, the real battle was about to begin, and Hannah, the maid's daughter, had just changed the course of a $500 million deal with nothing but honesty and courage. The ballroom emptied slowly, but the air remained heavy with tension. The flashing cameras were gone, yet the echoes of Hannah's words still hung in the silence. Staff whispered nervously as chairs were stacked and the microphones were carried away. For the guests, it had been a shocking pause in what was supposed to be a smooth, polished signing. For Mari and Hannah, it felt like standing on the edge of a storm. In a private conference room upstairs, the Japanese delegates sat around a long table. Their faces were calm but serious. Ms. Takahashi laid out both versions of the contract side by side. One had the original Japanese text clear and protective. The other, the English version, pointed to a company that had nothing to do with investor safety. It was like two doors leading to opposite directions. The billionaire's legal aid shifted uncomfortably as the differences were read aloud. The translator sat stiff, his eyes lowered, unable to defend himself. The billionaire himself leaned back in his chair, trying to wear the same confident smile, but sweat glistened faintly at his temple. "The proposed transfer amount is $500 million, one of the delegates said in Japanese. His tone was quiet but firm. "This is not a miscommunication. This is deliberate," Ms. Takahashi nodded. "It cannot proceed. We will issue a formal hold." The billionaire spoke quickly, his voice sharp but controlled. "This is nonsense. There must have been a mistake in the copying process. Let us correct it and continue." But Ms. Takahashi shook her head. "Trust has been broken. We will not sign today." That single sentence struck harder than any shout. The deal, which had been prepared for months, collapsed in a moment. The journalists waiting outside sensed something was wrong when no official announcement came. News spread quietly at first, then faster as whispers turned into headlines. Billionaire's $500 million deal suspended for review. Meanwhile, Hannah and Mari sat in a smaller room nearby. Hannah held her mother's hand tightly. Mari had never felt so proud, yet so afraid. She whispered, "You have done something big, Hannah. Bigger than either of us can understand." A knock came at the door. It was Ms. Takahashi. She entered, her expression softer now. She bowed slightly to Mari and then looked at Hannah with kind eyes. "You spoke with truth and respect," she said. "Because of you, the investors were protected. Without your words, $500 million could have disappeared. Hana lowered her eyes, shy. I only said what the paper said, she replied quietly. Ms. Takahashi smiled. Sometimes that is the greatest courage, to speak simple truth when others are silent. She turned to Mari. You should be proud of your daughter. She has a gift. If she continues her studies, she could have a future in compliance, law, or international work. I will make sure her name is remembered in our report. Mari's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly bowed her head in gratitude. Thank you, ma'am. Later that week, regulators stepped in. They requested all documents, including the USB drive the legal aid carried. Inside, they found copies of contracts that showed clear intent to move funds into private accounts. It was not a mistake. It was a plan. The translator admitted, under questioning, that he had been instructed to simplify terms in ways that would benefit the billionaire's side. The billionaire released a public statement, calling it a simple misunderstanding. But behind the polished words, the truth spread quickly. His reputation suffered. Investors became cautious. Deals slowed down. In business circles, whispers of dishonesty followed his name wherever he went. For Mari and Hana, life changed quietly but meaningfully. The hotel's general manager called Mari into his office one afternoon. He thanked her for her loyalty and bravery and offered her a safer position with better hours. Your daughter's honesty saved not only the investors, but also the reputation of this hotel, he said kindly. We are grateful. News of Hana's act reached a local university that specialized in languages and international business. They invited her for a scholarship interview. The professors were amazed when they heard how a teenager had spotted what even professionals missed. They encouraged her to apply for programs in law and translation. For the first time, Hana began to see a future much bigger than the walls of the hotel. One evening, weeks later, Hana and Mari walked home together under the soft glow of streetlights. The world around them looked the same. Cars passing, shops closing, people chatting on the sidewalks. But inside, everything felt different. Mari looked at her daughter and said, You were brave, Hana. But more than that, you were respectful. That is why people listened to you. Hana smiled shyly. I was afraid, Mama. But I remembered what you always said, that we must tell the truth even if our voices shake. Mari squeezed her hand. And you did. You spoke the truth that saved many. Months passed. Regulators confirmed that the $500 million never left the investors' control. The shady company name disappeared from the hotel's meeting lists. The translator left quietly, and the billionaire faced strict oversight. Though he remained wealthy, his power was not as strong as before. In contrast, Hana's path opened wider. She spent her evenings reading not just Japanese, but also law books borrowed from the library. She practiced translating clauses and comparing meanings, always careful to look for hidden differences. Mari often found her late at night, asleep with books still open on her desk. She would cover her daughter with a blanket and whisper proudly, My brave girl. The story of the maid's daughter did not make the front pages of newspapers. It was not shouted on television. Instead, it spread quietly among those who worked in law, finance, and diplomacy. A story of a young girl who noticed the difference between two lines of text and by speaking up, protected millions. To many, it became a reminder. Honesty does not depend on title, wealth, or position. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected place. One afternoon, Hana returned a library book about Japanese proverbs. She carefully placed it back on the shelf and picked up another one about ethics in business. As she walked out of the library, she paused for a moment, thinking of the words that had changed her life. That's not what it says. She smiled softly, ready for the future, knowing that truth spoken with respect could change even the largest rooms in the world.